I'm Nicole Henderson, editor at The Whir, and I'd like to welcome you to today's session called 3 Ways to Capitalize on the Public Cloud to Grow Your Hosting Business. The presentation will feature Russ Brummel, Vice President of Operations, Glowtouch Technologies, Jeremy Christ, Vice President of Business Development at Glowtouch, as well as Thor Nolan, Senior Solutions Architect, Amazon Web Services. And I'm going to let each of our guests introduce themselves in a moment, but before we move on, I want to take care of a couple of things. First off, questions. We're going to save a few minutes at the end of the session for your questions, but if you think of questions as we go along, you can use the webinar software to submit them. If you ask a question and it doesn't get answered, maybe we've run out of time or it's a bit too specific, someone will reach out to you directly after the webinar, and there will also be some contact info on screen during the Q&A period. If you want to revisit the presentation later, you can find the video archive of the webinar at thewhir.com/webinars, and that should be up by the end of the week. Lastly, if you're planning on attending HostingCon in Austin between June 17th and 19th, Glowtouch will be presenting a similar session titled Cloud Diversification, the Next Wave of Infrastructure Optimization, and that's with Antonio Perano of ScienceLogic. And now, without further ado, let's get started by turning it over to Russ and Jeremy.
Hi there, this is Jeremy and Russ. I want to introduce Russ Brummel of Glowtouch. Russ is our Vice President of Operations, and for the past 6 years with Glowtouch, Russ has become an industry thought leader in web technology, including website development, custom web and mobile applications, and of course what we're talking about today, which is the cloud-based solutions for business. I would say that Russ has a passion for creative solutions to business problems and is exceptional in forming teams to work remote or on-site with your company. And my name is Jeremy Christ. I'm Vice President of Business Development. I'm an industry veteran in the web hosting automation software and server control panel aggregation, mainly with billing and provisioning type things. My main focus here with Glowtouch is to bring new opportunities to our partners, related mostly to web hosting software and exploring cloud as an option for new and existing businesses.
And this is Russ Brummel. Let me talk just a little bit about Glowtouch Technologies, and then we will introduce Thor Nolan from AWS. Glowtouch has been around since about 2001. We have become pretty much the go-to technical partner in the web hosting industry today. We do a lot of support and infrastructure management for name brands across the hosting industry that everybody would pretty much recognize. In the last couple of years, as the cloud has become the way that the industry is headed and the way that people are sort of exploring, we've also embraced that technology, working very clousely with the folks at AWS, also working fairly closely with the Parallels and some other companies who are spinning up cloud infrastructure management platforms. We have, in addition to supporting web hosting industries, we have a full line of application development, some of that centered around the web hosting industry, some of it traditional sort of business and enterprise level application development. So now I'd like to take a minute and introduce here Thor Nolan, who is the Senior Solutions Architect at Amazon Web Services, a guy that we've been working with very closely. Thor?
Thank you very much. This is Thor Nolan. I'm a Senior Solutions Architect with the environment of AWS, specifically working in the partner infrastructure. I was just waiting here for the slides to catch up. So let's talk a little bit about who is Amazon Web Services. A decade ago, Amazon.com realized it had developed a core competency in operating massive scale technology and infrastructure, data centers, and we embarked on a much broader mission of serving a platform of web services to a new customer segment, to developers and to businesses. AWS provides a highly reliable, highly scalable, low-cost infrastructure platform. in the cloud that powers hundreds of thousands of enterprises, governments, startup businesses in 190 countries around the world, with security and operational performance being the top priorities that we have.
As we talk to people around the web hosting industry, people are demanding increased security. As various hack attacks are obviously on the rise and in the news, people are also talking quite a bit about redundancy and uptime, and these are some of the reasons why we see people starting to talk to AWS and us about adopting cloud. Obviously, of course, the idea that you can pay as you go rather than investing in heavy infrastructure up front is always a key motivator in the hosting industry. One of the things that we have also talked with folks, especially very recently, about is the ability to deploy new services very, very quickly, as opposed to some of the traditional life cycles which would take months or quarters, and people would talk about end-of-the-year type engagements. Today people are talking about end-of-the-month type engagements, and how do we get to that kind of speed of deployment. And obviously there's always the question of what else can I offer? Can I offer things in new ways?
In the environment itself, Amazon Web Services provides the same familiar approaches to security that companies have been using for decades now. Importantly, it does this while also allowing the flexibility and the low cost of cloud computing. There's nothing inherently at odds about providing on-demand infrastructure while also providing the security isolation that companies have become accustomed to in their existing privately owned environments. AWS has completed certifications such as the ISO 27001, FISMA, SAS 70, and PCI with large customers and customers in the federal space, and all of our customers benefit from these compliance efforts in all of our regions globally. In 2012, Amazon sponsored a study by IDC in which they interviewed a group of our customers to get a sense of the results they get from using AWS. The results were quite favorable, with the aggregate numbers showing significant cost savings combined with better results in terms of reduced downtime. We're proud to deliver both benefits simultaneously, that we don't sacrifice the quality to reduce costs, and are most proud that our customers can demonstrate the benefits themselves. We encourage you to read this full report to get the full updates. It's available on our website.
Yeah, so what we're looking at here is we're looking at Gartner and their Magic Quadrant here, and really to kind of dovetail on what Thor was saying about the high scalability and cost effectiveness, the solution at AWS, we've got a placement in the top right quadrant here for vision and execution. And for me, you know, looking at this particular quadrant, we see a lot of good partners here. Amazon has a spread, if you can see that, out towards the top right, and really, you know, having a decade worth of information about Amazon and the data and the customers that are using it, it really helps to kind of scale and understand where Amazon needs to be. And with your company, you've got long-term goals and some short-term goals, and looking at your long-term execution, you know, under demanding circumstances, you really need to pick a partner that understands your long-term goals and understands that technology needs to evolve and where you're going to be with them long-term. Even for your short-term goals, which I'm going to talk a little bit about in a slide a little bit later on, but talking about vision and understanding how to kind of get you through those speed bumps, because you have, you know, some smaller companies that have different needs than long-term goals, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the webinar here.
one of the things that we as Glowtouch, as we were moving further into this space, wanted to look at is okay, what can we actually really start to do in terms of things that really impact our core competency, the web hosting industry. And we looked at partnering up with Parallels, who makes one of the more, I guess, complex and capable systems for service automation. And talking with them and talking with the folks at AWS, several people came up and said, well, we're not sure we can quite get to this level, but we hunkered down with some engineers. The guys at AWS were really terrific. The guys at Parallels offered some great assistance as well. And we stood up what ended up being, it's about a 32 server setup, and it spans availability zones at Amazon. It uses a bunch of Amazon technologies, but we stood up sort of as a proof of concept, a live laboratory that essentially you could run a web hosting company on tomorrow if you chose to take this to market. We actually have this as a live demo environment, and as Nicole mentioned, we're going to be at HostingCon. We'll also have it running there for people to talk about. So we'd be quite happy to visit with you a little bit and talk about what we've done so far and how that kind of might fit where you're going. So with that introduction complete, you've heard a little bit about AWS and a little bit about Glowtouch. Let's go on and we'll talk about some of the options that people have today to embrace the cloud to help grow their hosting business. So first option, which is fairly easy to get to, is to look at AWS Cloud to give you flexibility in building additional value-added services. It's something that you can use to grow your business in the short term, and also in the long term. You can attack new markets and things like that just by targeting some additional services in addition to what you're already doing today. What we also see some hosting partners doing is they frame their whole infrastructure rather on a solution like AWS, because it gives them the security, the scalability, and the growth pattern. As part of our panel at HostingCon, we're actually going to have some of those folks there at the show and talking about some of their experiences in doing that. We also see some folks embracing what Glowtouch has started to do really as sandbox as a service. The traditional sort of sandbox is there's a dedicated demo server, test server, dev server somewhere, and people can use that as a sandbox. Well, in the cloud environment, we can give everybody their own sandbox to play in, and we can do it as a service and do it on a day-by-day kind of basis. The Parallels automation solution, which we just sort of showed you a diagram on, is one of those things. So let's talk first of all about that first option, about using AWS to institute value-added services. One of the ways that a number of people, we're helping them today embrace this, is simply adding new offerings very, very quickly. So a small hosting company that really wants to offer their own hosted Microsoft Exchange and SharePoint, for example, would be able to do that in a cloud-based environment very, very quickly, integrated into their billing and provisioning system very quickly, scale it up in a matter of weeks and bring it to market, rather than the more traditional way where they'd have to stand up a bunch of infrastructure in their data center and work through that whole process, that acquisition process and installation process. It also allows people then, obviously, to sort of test and target those value-added services, since they can spin them up so quickly. We've also seen some folks looking at spinning up a second or third web hosting brand that is, pretty much exclusively cloud-based or offers a number of cloud-based services. So a growing hosting company may go after an entirely new market niche at an entirely new price point by simply spinning up a second or a third brand to go after them, and AWS in the cloud is a great way to leverage that, again, quickly and securely. One of the things that we've seen, especially as people try to go more global, is using the cloud so that you can target different markets, you can do a controlled market release, you have a relatively low investment, you haven't bought a number of server racks, instead you've just rented as you go with AWS. And so you have the ability, if a market doesn't take off for whatever reason, you can turn it off with a minimal loss. It lets you innovate and pivot a lot more quickly than you used to be able to in a traditional data center model. So I think, Thor, were you going to talk about the flexible capacity?
Pardon me, I was talking to a unit here. Okay, so before AWS launched in 2006, businesses would take on the massive capital investment of building their own infrastructure, or they would contract with a vendor for a fixed amount of data center capacity that they might or might not use. This choice either meant paying for wasted capacity or having to worry about the amount of capacity forecasted and whether it was insufficient to keep pace with your growth. Businesses spent time, money managing their own data center or co-location facility, all of which meant time not spent on growing their actual business or differentiating their offering for their customers. AWS has enabled customers to acquire on-demand technology, infrastructure services on a pay-as-you-go basis with no upfront investment. And so our model is making it easy for customers to spin up new resources when they need them and shed them when they don't.
Thor makes some really good points here, and talking about 3 different points here that I see, especially growing up in the industry and understanding what software vendors are looking to do. Spinning up an environment can be a daunting task, and just 5 years ago, understanding that you had a data center or you had computers in your office, the option of cloud was a little expensive. But today, as Thor's mentioned, you have the ability to put an infrastructure in place and spin up as many servers as you'd like. And then at the point when you find that you're in development waves, you can actually spin these environments down or start from scratch. Turn it off, something broke, and then spin up a brand new image of it if you'd like. So that's very intriguing to me about fast deployment and speed to market, especially with software development. So looking at your niche areas, niche hosting, and looking at new customer markets today, it's a lot different than it was 5 years ago. Test labs, staging environments, and then eventually going to your production environment, which going from those staging environments to production are very quick today. And then looking at availability for content delivery networks too, where video, photo, and data aggregation for supplying supplemental data to your partners. That is also a reality today, where you don't have to have a data center, a large data infrastructure. You can also scale with your partners in very interesting ways today. One of the things too that we're seeing is geo-distributed, getting close to your customers. We have customers all over the world today, and unfortunately, we've become less patient, and we want more data. And to do that, you have to have geolocative type technology. AWS offers that. So spinning up and having high availability in different areas and different zones, that is a reality today. Even if you're on a startup budget, you have the ability to do that and supply that under 3 seconds load time to your customers. So that's a very intriguing point. The other thing we have here is migrate your entire infrastructure over to AWS Cloud for ultimate scalability. And that's an interesting one, especially growing up into the field of entrepreneurship and understanding what your infrastructure is going to look like and who's going to maintain it. When you're able to peel off entire infrastructure and take those hats off your employees to put that infrastructure in a different area and really let your employees concentrate on what they know best, that's a very nice option today, which wasn't around just 3 to 5 years ago. And it allows you to stay ahead of your competition because you're not getting distracted with the day-to-day. You have a team of people that concentrate in areas that they want to and that they need to, and AWS and cloud allows you to do that.
So when we talk about Amazon Web Services global infrastructure, there's a couple of definitions we should probably provide. First is that AWS has 8 geographical regions worldwide. Plus we have an ITAR compliant region in the United States for public sector and federal, state, local, etc. use that has that ITAR requirement. Within the geographic regions that we have globally are availability zones. So these are distinct locations within a region that are engineered to be isolated from failures in other of these availability zones. They provide an inexpensive, low latency network connectivity to these other availability zones in the same region. So by launching your instances in separate regions, you can design your application to be closer to the specific customer base or to meet legal or other requirements. By launching your instances in separate availability zones within those regions, you can protect your applications from the failure in a single location.
One of the things that Glowtouch has done, is, as we mentioned earlier, is we've built this sandbox as a service, and as Thor mentions, we've built it across multiple availability zones to give it high availability. One of the things that we've talked to various hosting partners about is this geo-distributed availability and also high availability within regions or within countries. And so as we stood up our sandbox as a service, we used, as we mentioned, Parallels Automation platform on AWS, which it can let you test out PA if it's something that you're interested in growing your business into that. I'm sure the Parallels folks would love to talk to people about that. But it also gives you freedom to build new applications, to test them with almost zero consequence, really. In the traditional data center model, you would have to stand up a server because as you're testing these things out, you don't want to break something on the server that breaks some other critical application. In the sandbox as a service model, you simply stand one up, and as Jeremy mentioned earlier, if something goes wrong in your testing and your development, you simply shut it off and spin up a new one, and you have a fresh, clean slate to work from. This kind of technology also allows folks to start to look at penetrating the more profitable power users or software development or dev test type customer bases. Those folks, if you're running a business that does a lot of shared hosting, those guys are pretty intensive users in your shared hosting. But when you can spin them off onto their whole separate infrastructure, let them use as much as they want, they can become much more easily manageable and very profitable for you as well. One other thing that we see people doing in this kind of environment is that you can spin up a small business solution. So you help your customers eliminate the server under the desk. They can stand up the solution in the cloud. They can run it for a while to make sure that it's exactly what they want, and then eventually cut over to that as a live environment. Or again, if it's something they decide they don't want to go there, they simply turn it off and go on about their business. One of the other things that we see kind of when you start to compare and contrast a little bit, the traditional on-premises data center has some great things about it, and we've all grown up in an industry where we manage the servers and we manage the racks, and we like to see the lights flash. We've all spent time back in the server room up to our eyes in cables, right? But it's also got its drawbacks, and when you start to look at a cloud-based infrastructure, it helps you increase innovation, which is what more and more the market is demanding today. You can experiment quickly. There's a relatively low cost of experimentation, relatively low risk because failure is relatively inexpensive if it happens. It also allows you to really fail forward. You can try and you can learn, and you don't have to have a raging success to learn something and grow in the market. You can then, as we've mentioned before, you can just turn it off and try something else, but you've learned something along the way, which really fosters more innovation. The drawback is that some people, when they have dedicated infrastructure, they tend to become a little bit more risk averse, and that behavior is increasingly being frowned on by the market, who wants to, as Jeremy mentioned, they want more data, they want it faster, they have less patience. Mm-hmm. So we've talked a little bit about the options here. Let me talk for just a minute, if I could, about really how the cloud marketplace today, or cloud implementers today, are really implementing these cloud-based solutions. It's a little bit different than the traditional data center model. So what happens more often is it's a lot about early on you spend a little bit of time architecting and building out a proof of concept. In that phase, you as a web hoster would want to find a partner that you can rely on, that can help you get there in terms of infrastructure, and also in terms of just management and integration with your existing systems. Very quickly in the cloud space, people tend to launch and then iterate. When you had traditional data center type infrastructure, fine-tuning that infrastructure could be problematic, especially if you need more or less infrastructure as you go. In the cloud space, you can iterate much more quickly and much more easily. And then over time, you'll want to have a professional services team or a professional services partner supporting your customers, helping fine-tune the infrastructure, helping maximize the return on the infrastructure, helping you spin up new offerings, new flavors as you come. So what we've seen increasingly is this sort of launch quickly, iterate quickly, fine-tune over time as we go.
Very good. Thank you, Russ and Thor. Just to let you know, and I want to reiterate what Nicole said, is that we do have participation going on at HostingCon in Austin, and I invite you to come to the panel that Russ is on June 17th, starting at 1:15, and it's cloud diversification, the next wave of infrastructure optimization, and that's with the issues and trends track. So we invite you, and we look forward to talking with you in person.
Great. Thanks. We're all really looking forward to HostingCon and that session in particular, so I think it'll be great. So it looks like we've got a lot of questions. So I'll start by directing them at you guys, Russ and Jeremy. The first question is, you've presented some interesting ideas, but what are the first steps you recommend for a small growing hoster to really get going? We sell a few SaaS apps now.
Go ahead.
Sure, this is Russ. I think one of the questions that we've seen from people who are now looking at, okay, I'm doing some stuff, I really want to do more stuff here, how do I get there? The first step is really trying to define where you're going, because there are so many options. And as psychologists have said, you sometimes suffer from opportunity disorder, where there's too many opportunities, you can't figure out which one to embrace, right? So we've helped a number of growing hosting companies to kind of figure out where their market niche is and figure out which offerings would help them. Sometimes that's really much more of a cost-benefit kind of play. Sometimes it's more of a we want to grow in customers kind of play. Sometimes it's we have outdated infrastructure, we know we're going to need to replace it, we're looking at how to replace it most efficiently, what does the new infrastructure look like, and things like that. And so there's a lot of discussion and decision, and as people choose to embrace the cloud, especially the AWS cloud, for part or all of their infrastructure, you start to be able then to cut, as we mentioned, cut cycles out of the deployment time. So that's always part of the discussion is where do you see the opportunity, how fast do you want to get there? And then that helps to make the decision. Obviously, we've been around the web hosting industry for a dozen years, and we've seen pretty much everything. Nothing seems to surprise us anymore. So we're happy to engage in those kind of discussions.
Okay, great. We've got another question here, and they're asking for clarification. This is not selling AWS through Parallels. It's hosting Parallels in AWS, correct?
Yeah, correct. our setup actually was Parallels automation on top of AWS infrastructure. There has been some discussion, we've had a couple of people ask that question about, I have a PA instance already running and I want to sell AWS to my customers. I know they're going to go there anyway. I want to sort of retain those customers. And that's something that we are actively looking at with the folks at Parallels. And how to bring that quickly to market and offer. I think we'd be happy to kind of follow up afterwards and talk about that. We do a ton of development around the PA platform.
Great. The next question is, you mentioned Parallels, but we use cPanel. How would we work with your ideas?
Well, working with Parallels or cPanel, we have adoption in both areas, and we have knowledge in both areas. Being around the hosting industry and Glowtouch for 10 years plus, we tend to see lots of different types of technology that comes across. And really, what we're doing is looking at opportunities for new and innovative ways of using those technologies. And we have a huge team here that can help them kind of go through the business process of what's going to work best for them. Ultimately, they have the decision, but we're able to help them compare quite a bit and help them with their decision making.
Great. I know you kind of talked about what you'll be doing at HostingCon, and we've got another question here that asks, is there a place that I could see a demo of some of this in action?
Sure, absolutely. I think there's a link right there on the page that we're looking at. And there's a little sign-up form at the other end of that link. So we have this running on AWS today, and we can show people what it looks like. We're also going to, in our booth at HostingCon, I think we're booth 605.
That's right.
We're going to be running this demonstration. We'll probably have some folks from AWS actually there, on site to talk to AWS partners and other folks if they have some questions about AWS specifically too.
Great. This next question sounds like it's directed towards Thor. You mentioned that AWS has architected security requirements relevant to the hosting industry. Where can I go to learn more about security requirements when I'm considering building a solution on AWS?
A great question. The security is obviously one of the top priorities for us and for our Glowtouch partner as well. We have designed at Amazon Web Services a security gateway page. It can be found by going to aws.amazon.com/security. This page provides a wealth of information. You will find our Amazon Web Services overview of security processes white paper there. You will find a white paper on security best practices in the cloud. You will find a white paper on the risk and compliance efforts that we continue to take in the environment. You'll find just a lot of valuable information. So that tends to be the #1 starting point for any security related issue or question that you may have about Amazon Web Services.
And Nicole, just as an aside, that's actually the exact same page that Glowtouch started in our relationship with AWS on. We've had obviously clients over time have said we want to adopt AWS, and our development folks went straight there. And it talks about HIPAA compliance and SOC compliance and all sorts of things. It's really a fantastic resource.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So the next question is, can you share more detail around capacity planning relative to cost savings? Do you have any tools that would help me get started?
From the overall economics perspective, we do have an economics subsite. So you can go to aws.amazon.com/economics. You will find the IDC white paper that we mentioned earlier. You'll also find, linked off that, you'll also find linked there our monthly pricing calculator, which provides a great deal of information. And with regards to the overall, whether it be capacity planning or cost savings, I think between the information that you will find with the monthly pricing calculator to actually enter in what an example configuration would look like and see what the monthly cost would be, along with some of the other information with regards to the sort of differences between an operational expenditure type of approach versus a capital expenditure type of approach. You'll find all of that information on the economics subsite, and I think that would be probably the best starting place.
Okay, great. And keep in mind we're recording this session and we will have the archive up at the end of the week, so if you missed any of the answers to these questions, they will be included in the video. We have one final question. Can you help me understand the AWS global infrastructure in more depth? What do you mean when you reference multiple regions and multiple availability zones?
We touched on this a little bit during the webinar itself. Really what we're talking about are two definitions that we have created to isolate infrastructure. And so globally we have 8 geographic regions plus our ITAR compliant region here in the US. These regions are isolated environments of compute and storage resources. So what this helps you do is to achieve things like in the EU where you have data sovereignty requirements. The EU region for AWS meets data sovereignty requirements that the EU has standardized there. And so you have a way to meet certain various compliance efforts. In addition to that, if you have a primary customer base that is based in Japan, having a local or more local infrastructure environment to serve that customer base is going to definitely provide a better customer experience. So for example, AWS's Japan region in the Asia Pacific area would help to do that. And so we have 8 regions globally. We continue to look at the customer demand globally for expansion efforts. So that's from a global perspective. When we look at within each of these regions, we have the concept of availability zones. And this is a logical definition that we've created. Each region has more than one, or two or more availability zones within it. This allows you to create more highly available types of architectures that allow you to have resilience to various failure types. And so we continue to expand this footprint and to work to make sure that all of the elements, the infrastructure blocks, building blocks that we have provided to our customers allow them to build very high-performing and highly available type of environments for their needs to meet their customer needs.
Okay, great. And those are all the questions we have. But is there anything else you guys want to add?
I think it's been a good time, Nicole. Thank you for helping us out, and Thor and Jeremy, thank you for joining in. It's been really great for us.
Exactly, and I would say the same thing. Thank you very much, Nicole, and thank you very much, everybody from the Glowtouch team, and look forward to working with you greater.
Great. I'd like to thank everyone for attending and for submitting your questions. And of course, I'd like to thank you, Russ, Jeremy, and Thor for making a great case for using the public cloud to grow your hosting business. Don't forget, you can see Glowtouch present at HostingCon 2013 on June 17th to 19th in Austin, Texas. The early bird rate expires May 16th, so register today at www.hostingcon.com.